Whew. I'm wearing my Black Panther shirt today, so that can only mean one thing. Whew. Alright guys, here it is, T-Challa Spare. I had a lot of fun doing this build, and so as usual, for my videos, what I do is I talk about how I finish the actual print. I started off modeling it in Cinema 4D. So for the handle I used a cylinder and just did some minor extrudes, and then I also used the subdivision tool that's within Cinema 4D to kind of give it that shape at the end here. For the actual spearhead, it was just a cube. It was extruded at the points here, and it was brought up to a point at the edge, and I used the subdivision tool within Cinema 4D to give it this shape. So when looking for reference pictures, I seen there was this fabric material that was utilized for the actual mid part of the handle, and I did some research online and I couldn't find the exact material that they were using. After doing some research and looking online for fabric, I couldn't come up with anything. So my initial thought was to actually buy a rug that had the line texture that I was looking for, and then go over it with the airbrush to add the gold accent marks. But recently Hot Toys released a picture of their Black Panther that they're coming out in 1/6 scale. I was able to see some of the details that they had for the actual spear itself. So my initial thought after seeing it was that I could model it. So in terms of printing, I printed the handle at 80% infill, and I printed the spearhead at 80% infill as well. So for the mid portion, I printed at 10% infill just because I wanted to save on filament. So when I designed this, I designed it to fit a wooden dowel that runs down the middle of it. And my reasoning for doing that is for support and stability for the actual spear. My process after printing is to sand the products so I get a smooth finish. Once I have everything smooth, I go ahead and hit it with primer filler. So two things the primer filler does is, one, it helps you see any imperfection that you may have, and two, it aids in filling in some of the print lines that you may have left behind. So once I get the initial coat of primer filler on, I go back and I look to see what imperfections or where I have to sand at, and then I go ahead and do another pass of sanding. So for this particular build, I started off with 220 after I hit it with primer filler, and then I was able to move up to 400 and it gave me a smooth finish. Hit it one more time with primer filler, and then I was at a point where I was satisfied with how smooth it was. So for wet sanding, I just used I believe it was 1000 grit and 2000 grit wet sanding, and that gave me a nice smooth finish once I was done. Once I finished wet sanding, I hit it with one more coat of primer, and that was the final coat of primer before I moved on to paint. So a funny thing for this build with spray painting, I accidentally came across a spray paint that actually worked really well. My initial thought for this was just to airbrush some chrome silver paint on this, but I ended up running out of paint when I did the spearhead. So digging around in my garage, I found some chrome metallic spray paint that I had laying around for quite some time. I decided to try it, and boy was I impressed with the results that I got. In terms of the mid handle, so to achieve the look that I got, I did 2 passes of sanding, and I still wanted some texture because I wanted this to initially look like fabric, and I didn't do as much sanding as I did on the end handle and the spearhead. So I spray painted about 3 coats of matte black on the mid handle. I used a product called Rub and Buff to create the gold accents on the actual handle. In terms of how I got the actual design on the mid part, I masked off the entire handle. I used blue painter's tape and cut thin strips. And after I cut the thin strips, I laid it out in the design that I wanted. That gave me a guide to cut into the masking tape that I already had on there. So this way I cut along the blue lines and then was able to peel it off. And then I used Rub and Buff. And after I peeled everything off, I was able to get this look that I got on the actual handle itself. Now there's one more part to this build that I haven't done yet, and that's to add a feather to it. This is actually being shipped off to Canada. So before I do that, my wife will actually braid this leather lace, and then I will glue a white feather tip to the end here, and then that will complete this build fully. So here's a good look at it. Alright guys, so that does it for this build. I thank you guys so much for tuning in. I would like to thank Make for hosting this video. They have allowed me to share my videos on their platform. You will be seeing some more videos coming from me in the next few months. So I thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you would like to see more builds like this and some of the things that I'm doing, you can head over to my YouTube page at The Broken Nerd. If you want to keep up to date with some of the projects that I'm working on, you can follow me on Twitter at TheBrokenNerd83, and you can follow me on Instagram at TheBrokenNerd83. Once again, I thank you guys so much for tuning in. Peace and love. God bless. Testing out some new lighting.